The topic of today's video is suffering. In the previous one I was reporting on my trip and my realizations during this, and I would like to put some more context on what was being said, and perhaps even touch on the nature of ego backlash. I hope that I will remember this by the end of the video. Suffering is an important topic because it's everybody's business, right? And it's not easy to see what it's all about, because when we don't have enough perspective on this, we might think that suffering is pain, for example. It's all the bad stuff, right? No. It's very misleading in this. So, suffering has two components that come together. It's not that they are somehow separate. I don't want you to think that I'm somehow cutting suffering up into pieces. It's more like stretching to suffering to contrast. It's a thing. And those two parts are ignorance and duality. So what exactly is ignorance? Ignorance is the way in which the mind works. It's not an insult. It's not something bad. It just is that way, with no negative connotations or positive. It's our existential reality. We're ignorant. And what that means is that it's simply that ignorance means ignoring practically everything. It means that you are trying to make something infinite into finite and reason about it this way. And that may seem pretty abstract, but this is basically what I'm doing right now with you here. I am saying a lot of stuff and assuming that you understand each of the words that I'm saying. And no, this doesn't work that way. So, to give you some example, what is this? It's a watch, right? Pretty simple. So let's say this watch broke and you want to do something with it. You want to understand what's happened. So you're saying to yourself, this watch, well, it fell yesterday. I dropped it. And that's probably why it broke off. It broke. But there's been million of things that could have gone wrong with this thing. So you take it apart, and now it's not a watch anymore, right? It's a bunch of pieces, some gears, some springs there, and it's still a watch, right? Well, you ignored everything that was inside of this watch before by saying it's just a watch. Like I am saying all those words right now and expecting you to understand them. And there is so much going on this watch right now that is unimaginable. Like all the bits that interact with each other. And it's not just those bits that are inside. Because if you think how to make this watch, this thing, it's mind-boggling. And you go like, yeah, it's just a watch, right? Like all the people that had to go to work, all the resources that had to be gathered, all the machines that had to be operated, all the people that had to design this thing. And all those people's lives, their histories. And they all come together to form this. And you're saying that it broke because it fell. Probably. I'm not saying that this thing is... It is what it is, right? We don't notice this stuff. It's not that we're stupid because we are saying that it's a watch, but we are ignoring stuff all the time. And that's part of the design. It's exactly how it should be. It's not that this watch is this watch is exactly a thing as it is a process. And from the process point of view, it's infinite. And in a certain sense, if anything along this wouldn't be this thing right here. And among our everyday lives, we are not aware of just how complicated this thing is. And it still runs. This ties to my previous video about the fact that reality is perfect. And it's not an accident that this works this way. It's not a fault that men are ignorant. No. The other thing that comes together to create suffering is duality. Duality is simply the fact that every stick has two ends. It's the fact that every left has its right, every up has its down, every good has its bad, and every pro has its con. The fact that we are caught up in choosing, in deliberate working life out, is the fact that we can think that some pros outweigh the cons is simply because we do not see the whole thing. We do not see the full picture of this thing. And these two are the basis for these two, or it's basically one thing. This is the basis for suffering. Suffering is when we do not observe, we cannot observe the whole cycle that is happening, and we mistakenly think that we are doing something. That when we frantically try to solve a situation, we are identified with it. And it's ignorance. And of course, there is the objection that we cannot know everything, right? No, we can't. But you can see for yourself, if you start to inspecting your life, that it's true. Well, maybe it's not true for you, but it's true for me, at least. So from the scientific point of view, there are the big cycles, like, for example, the universe with its galaxies, with its stars, with its black holes, with its star systems, with its planets, all dancing in the void, in space. Then there is the Earth, of course. It's not a closed system, no. It gets light from the sun. This is actually pretty cool that everything in here is solar powered. That includes us. Then of course there is nature and technology, and there are men in between. Well, there is us, of course. There is the society. People interacting with each other, forming groups, forming dependencies, forming cycles, influencing each other, right? And then, of course, there is physics, biology, that try to dissect men into parts. I'm sure it works to some degree. But there is also the more subtle stuff, the unscientific things, like psychology. Well, it has a pretense to be a science, but it's very difficult to create experiments for that. And it's impossible if you are trying to understand your own psychology. You cannot run experiments there, nor should you. But if you want, you can start observing yourself and see just how you work from your own point of view, and learn that your point of view is actually something that is always changing and influencing, and it's influenced by other stuff. You can see the various bits of your own psyche that are picked up from somewhere. You can see how they interact, how they emote you. Gurdjieff, in his work, it's called self-remembering and self-observation. You can actually learn the various kinds of eyes that you have, and even perhaps earn yourself some kind of objectivity in this, when you can simultaneously perceive your inner and outer experience. So suffering is when you mistakenly think that you are doing stuff. And of course, from one point of view, you are doing all the stuff and everything is survival, and you're trying to do your best to not die. You are living your life, right? But from another point of view, no, your life is living you. And I personally find this perspective more entertaining because I don't have to fight anything anymore. Unless I have to, of course, because I'm ignorant. And this is, I think it's very worthwhile to learn the cycles that you're going through. Not because you want to change them, because that would be suffering, of course. It would be just another eye trying to influence another eye and resolve inner conflict. But just to see this, seeing it is enough, because it gives you the luxury of letting go. It's like a dog that chases its own tail until it just falls tired and knows that it's impossible. So my yesterday's video was it was a video about ego backlash, and spiritually speaking, ego backlash is often associated with the bad ego that tries to wreck your spiritual stuff. And I don't think it's like that at all. What happens is, when you upset your cycles enough, when you destabilize the whole thing, it tries to return to its equilibrium or find its new point of gravity. And it doesn't matter whether you do your spiritual stuff, your meditation, which is of course upsetting the cycles by not doing anything. It's equally true for the opposite case, when you are a very up there and you start doing stupid stuff and tell yourself, oh, this thing is wrong, I knew that. It's just you breaking your homeostasis. And of course, there are things that are more or less healthy. Of course, but you don't choose what you do. And of course, you will prove me wrong after this video, right? Or not? This video may upset some of your cycles and trigger you. Of course. So it's not really bickering is not really helpful. And trying to explain stuff to people is not really helpful. Unless they don't get it, they don't get it. Unless they get it, whatever, you know what I mean. Thanks.